All right, we are live on Facebook. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening. Good
Rich,
evening.
Good
Greg,
evening.
our very special guest, which we'll be introducing in just a moment. How you
It's
guys, how you
how's
guys doing
everyone
tonight?
doing? It's been again another tense one. We always try to kind of, the three of us try to usher in a lot of good news, and we try to, we've been critiqued for negativity once in a while, but as this previous week has shown, yet again, there's like nothing but tension and threat to the entire Armenian nation, but Artsakh and Armenia in particular, with the physical threat. So again, I'm just checking in. How are you guys? Everybody good? Everybody?
Yeah, I'm doing okay. It's good to see you guys. Obviously, very concerned about the situation in Armenia and Artsakh. And we're gonna be able to put a spotlight on Artsakh a lot more with our guest this evening, and so we're really grateful to be joined by him. And I'm going to introduce him in just a moment as we allow people to tune in tonight. Rich, any welcoming remarks you'd like to make as well?
I think I start off the week, with a lot of hope and a lot of drive, and I try and do my best to maintain it throughout, the week to get to these broadcasts because, I really believe in what we're doing and the reasons behind it. It's just challenging because there's so much news coming out, conflicting reports. On one hand, we've got more aggression. On the other hand, I see interesting posts about economic and infrastructure developments and things. And I'm thinking, how are these two universes running simultaneously? And so I'm just trying to make sense of it all, just like the rest of us here. So just an interesting time for us all.
But the point of today is that we always want to make sure that we keep the eye on the conversation, on the most of what's pertinent, what's happening, the importance, and how pertinent to the existence of the Armenian spirit is Artsakh and everything around Artsakh. You and I and David are going to be involved in a couple of projects. We'll explain to people later about what we're doing coming up in September or so with one of our guests. But David, most importantly, let's introduce who we have right now with us, who is joining us, and the conversation we'll be having.
Yes, great segue, Greg. Thank you, guys. I'm very, very proud and honored to introduce our guest this evening, someone who we all feel very fortunate to be able to call a friend as well. I hope it's okay to say that. Mr. Robert Avetisyan, the Permanent Representative of Artsakh to the United States of America. He's based in Washington, D.C. Robert, thank you so much for joining us tonight and staying up late with us this evening to speak to us. We feel that we're starting to feel that also the focus has been so much on Armenia, right? With the elections and with the latest attacks from Azerbaijan now on the territory of Armenia, which has caused casualties to Armenian soldiers on Armenian territory. Yet we, like Greg, you just mentioned, we never want to lose sight of Artsakh, the importance of Artsakh, and the status and the situation of Artsakh right now, post-war. What are we now, 8 months or so post-war? So it's really, we're really glad to welcome you back, Robert. Since you last joined us at our town hall shortly after the November 9 agreement on November 16, we had a virtual town hall with yourself, and we were so fortunate to have you then. So thank you so much. Welcome back to Arach Media. Robert, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. I'm always enjoying the conversation with you, and we always enjoy the opportunity to reach out to everyone who is interested with the developments in the region.
Exactly. So with that, we'll get started right away with the interview. Robert, what could you tell us about the situation right now on the ground in Artsakh? Here we are this many months since the fighting stopped.
Yes, David, well, the fighting stopped, but it doesn't mean that the war is over, the conflict is resolved, because the core issue, which is the status of Artsakh, is still up in the air. I mean, we all strive and have been striving for the recognition of our international status as a sovereign democracy. But the process hasn't led to the political settlement of that. And whatever was reached on November 9 was a statement. And the statement implies, if you take a kind of a gradation of diplomatic documents, is the natural expectation that statement will turn into a more comprehensive agreement, which would be more heavy politically and which would create more opportunities for long-term peace and stability in the region. The situation in Artsakh is developing as any post-war society would developing. We are trying to restore our lives and to make sure that whoever was in Artsakh remains in Artsakh, and whoever was forced out by the aggressors returns to Artsakh and continues living there. So the Artsakh has gradually turned into a big construction site. The number one issue is housing. And the state, with the help of the Armenian government and our diaspora, they have launched massive projects on construction of residences in various parts of Artsakh. In parallel with that, there are also attempts to restore the economic potential of Artsakh, because we lost pretty much 80% of arable lands. And now there is a new movement of new attempt to make new arable areas in Artsakh, because the Artsakh has always been traditionally agricultural. With that, with all the most pressing humanitarian issues, of course, there is an issue of restoration of this normal sense and trust of the population towards their future, because it's very important. And although in Artsakh, this is not the first time that we undergo through aggression, this is the last year's aggression was unprecedented in many things, in scope, in scale, in terms of very open participation of Turkey and very open involvement of international terrorist groups from the Middle East. So this is a new reality now. And many people, of course, realize that this conflict is much more challenging in terms of how it can be prevented in the future, right? Yes, we have peacekeeping forces there who maintain stability, and even if there are minor incidents, everything is settled down very quickly. But we know that the intention is not peaceful from the attacking side. Azerbaijan doesn't demonstrate any willingness to engage in these comprehensive talks over the status of Artsakh. With that said, Artsakh, just like often has been said also by our foreign minister, Mr. David Babayan, we can be compared to a soldier in the ICU, right? Yes, we're wounded, but we have survived, and we're trying to get back on our feet as soon as possible and to begin again rebuilding our lives, rebuilding our economy, strengthen our political capacity, both domestically and internationally, and once again restore our all aspects of our statehood as it was before the 2020, as it was before.
Yeah, Robert. Yeah, Robert, I wanted to just kind of follow up, not move on to the next question, but something you just mentioned. The current it was a new injection of the Turkish, what do you call it, support into the South of Caucasus, right? Which it wasn't earlier on. I mean, they've always been a strategic partner of Azerbaijan, but the amount of aid that the Azeri military received, some Russian military analysts said that at some point that you could tell that the Turkish military almost took over the operational command. Is this something that we can avoid in the future, or this is here to stay for the near present?
It's hard to say, Greg. It's hard to say. Of course, that was in violation of all the existing norms. And this open aggression of a country using all its weaponry. And there are several aspects which actually complicate this story, right? One is that Turkey is a NATO member. Mm-hmm. And the second largest army, a strong army, right? And if a NATO member can act in the manner they want anywhere in the world, including in the South Caucasus, it kind of raises two natural questions. Was NATO informed about all this? If no, is there really any international mechanism or regional or organizational mechanism in the NATO or in the wider community of nations to suppress those aggressive actions? Because again, this is not just Turkey helping Azerbaijan. This is Turkey, and those reports that Turkey was implementing the command and control, they were proved by Turkish officials themselves, by Azerbaijani officials, by many intelligence services around the globe. And the fact is further aggravated by the notion that Turkey openly was transporting international terrorists from Syria. So we see not only Turkish assistance to Azerbaijan, we see a group of nations and actors, non-state actors, state and non-state actors, which gather together, including international terrorists, and they launch aggression in violation of their previous commitments, in violation of international law, in violation of international humanitarian law, right? In violation of the OSCE Minsk Group vision towards settlement of the conflict or how to deal with the conflict. And they enforce their vision of the regional situation. And this is very much resembling the law of the jungle, which should be unacceptable in the 21st century. Right. What can we do to prevent that from recurring again? We have to continue working with all the governments who are interested in a peaceful and stable South Caucasus and the rest of the world. We have to continue working with all the governments who are against the international terrorism, who do not tolerate any force which can use white phosphorus against peaceful population, who do not tolerate any force which is openly hostile and continues to threaten peaceful civilians with further massacres. And of course, that should be as a complement to our own domestic efforts to strengthen ourselves as army, as society, and as a nation as a whole. And in our case, as an Armenian nation, we need to keep investing in our unity as Armenians, because in your introductory word, David, you said that the situation in Armenia and in Artsakh, they're very much intertwined. And if you keep your eye on Artsakh, you keep your eye on Armenia. If you're concerned with Armenia, you should be concerned also with Artsakh. We cannot survive without each other, and these are part of a general challenge to our nation.
Yeah, understood. So with all that said and all that going on, what would you say the outlook, not only in terms of like the pulse on the ground is in Artsakh, but you know, what does a path forward look like for the population? Because that's, you know, I mean, ultimately we're talking about this not just because of land, we're talking about it because of people. So what does the outlook look like on the ground in Artsakh, and what do you think the path forward looks like?
Artsakh has survived as a state, as a bureaucracy, as administration, as economy. Artsakh is continuing to be home to Armenian population. Yes, we are still endangered by aggressive neighbors, but we have forces on the ground, currently the Russian peacekeeping forces, which kind of serve as a guarantor of our security, at least for the next several years. Our vision is to continue living in Artsakh. Our vision is to continue rebuilding our lives. And I realize that this may sound utopic or non-realistical, but back in 1988, when the rest of the world was signaling us to give up to Azerbaijani threats, then still Soviet Azerbaijani threats. Then in 1991, when it was already an independent Azerbaijan, we continued to get that threats. Many governments didn't believe that Artsakh can survive as Armenian. Many governments were signaling us to give up and take whatever condition we can as autonomy or as any sort of vague status, which would eventually bring to the Armenization of Artsakh. But we survived, and we survived due to thanks to various factors. But the most important of those factors was resoluteness of the entire Armenian nation to fight for Artsakh as part of the greater Armenian homeland. So we have that understanding in Artsakh, that Artsakh, Armenia, diaspora, we are all parts of the same body. We are all parts of the same Armenian homeland. If we stick together, we can bring around miraculous victories like the one in 1994, like these decades of very steady growth and achievements in pretty much every respect. I mean, Artsakh, can you believe that Artsakh was energy self-sufficient? We were even exporting energy to Armenia. We were exporting food. We were exporters of so many things. We were doing pretty good economically. So there is a potential. And economically, we did not fail our test for independence. We have come up as, we were praised actually very often as the most democratic. We are state, but even as the world was not recognizing us as a state, but the world knew that as a state, we were the most democratic state in the South Caucasus for a very long period of time. And our elections, without any international intervention or international help, political, were always objective, transparent. They reflected the will of the people. And again, we proved that we can live as an open, democratic, and economically prosperous and strong society. Yes, there are limits to our forces. And apparently we cannot resist the aggression by at least 8 governments, like we have seen during the 2020 war. Yeah, there were 8 governments who were assisting Azerbaijan to a certain degree, to various degrees. Yes, but with a proper geopolitical configuration, with proper cooperation, and with that unity, I believe that we can survive, and to say the least, we will continue developing as Armenians, part of the Armenian homeland.
It's amazing to hear that, because it echoes the sentiment that we've been trying to kind of usher in here, that I think Armenians, given the unity, I don't think we've reached our potential of what we can achieve. And I think we've, if it clicks and the nation comes together, the heights to which we can soar have yet to be reached. I have a couple of quick follow-up to what you mentioned. For those listening, because Arach Media, we're an educational, right, entity. We try to bridge the gap with those that are curious and bring the pertinent conversations to kind of inform the audience. You mentioned 8 nations, right? I believe that the nations would be obviously Azerbaijan. Turkey would be the second nation fighting against Artsakh, right? There was definitely the Syrian component in there, right, vis-a-vis Turkey. And then the Afghanistan and Pakistan had a little bit of a soft application to it. Were there more? Personally, I think there was a heavy hand, and this again, if you can't comment on it, we can leave it on the table. I think there was a heavy hand from the United Kingdom, in my opinion, or some kind of a let it be, because they have strong let's call it energy sector, interests in Baku, let's call it that way. Are those the nations that you're alluding to?
Great. It's easy just to analyze the route from where, during active hostilities, Azerbaijan was getting weapons every day.
Yes.
There is a list of nations, and some of them were very surprising for us, because some of them were also parts. They have genocidal attempts against them throughout their history, right?
Yes.
We were trying to reach out to all the governments, not to arm openly fascist government in Azerbaijan, which was not hiding their intentions towards Artsakh, which again, they were using white phosphorus. They were using mercenaries, terrorist groups. They were using these kamikaze drones and long-range missiles and everything they could, right? So it's very easy to analyze that list, and it may be even longer if you look at the airports and the flights and everything. You just look at the course of events, then you will see them.
Absolutely. I want to kind of ask. I've noticed that in our usually when Armenia. So we seem to be always playing a bit of a defense game, right? And the defense game usually is as such, like, for example, when we've liberated Artsakh, I remember there were like a few minor people that would always talk about, hey, I think it's now time that we press on the Western Armenia and the issue of Nakhichevan, because you understand that the way the game of politics is played, the more you keep the pressure on them, the more that they have to respond to that, rather than continue the aggressive stance that they have towards the current lands that we have. What I have to say about this is, yes, currently we have whatever we have in Artsakh, in the composition that we have. However, when the rhetoric about the NKR and the status of how it was then is being considered, right, even within the heinous framework within Azerbaijan, when are we going to start talking about the NKR pieces that are currently completely off the map, like Hadrut and the Shahumyan district? Is that part of a conversation that we want to have? I know they crown Shushi as their like crown jewel of the country, but those three items have always historically been christened and given as NKR, and were always NKR and thus Artsakh. Do we need to continue that conversation, and are we having that conversation? I understand right now it's a little bit premature maybe, but can we get to that conversation?
We absolutely should, and we do. It is part of the conversation. And actually, Hadrut is a historic Jizak, hasn't been conquered for 3,000 years. It was always populated by Armenians until currently it's occupied with the help of Turkey. But it is part of the dialogue, it is part of our demands, and it definitely should be included as a prerequisite for any long-term solution of this conflict. We have our clear vision towards that, and we will demand and do whatever we can for the occupation of the occupied lands of the Republic of Artsakh.
Okay. In the framework of what's happening currently, right? Recently, we heard a little bit of the conversation, obviously, from Baku, that they want to, even to the Artsakh that's currently in the peacekeeping position, and Armenian, the remainder, let's call it that, right? There's talks of some sort of a re-injection of the Azeri population into Stepanakert. What can you comment on that? Is that happening? Will that happen, or is this a pipe dream and a threat that they're making in order to kind of further escalate the already horrible situation?
Yeah, well, they know that the population in Stepanakert and elsewhere is very vulnerable now. Many people are overcoming the shock and trying to get back to what can be resembling a normal life. And with that, all those signals from Azerbaijan, of course, they jeopardize that process, and they make people think that eventually Azerbaijanis will end up in Stepanakert, that it's better to leave now. So they try to make sure that Artsakhtsis don't stay in Artsakh and leave from Artsakh. So there is no any subject of further discussion, because they know that they will eventually, and the whole world is pressing for that they need to consider the interests of the Artsakhtsis who live in Artsakh, at least 120,000 who currently live in Artsakh, and close to 26,000 are now in Armenia, with the vision of them of having them back when we have the capacity to provide them with residences. Right, but they say, and they're trying to do, they scare, they blackmail. It's a normal politics. They've been doing that for decades now, and there is nothing new, unfortunately. That we don't hear any realistic signal from Azerbaijan. No, in this case, we would call on everyone who is trying to make a better understanding or have a more objective situation in the region. Don't listen too much to Azerbaijani sources. They have a clear propaganda line, and they follow that line very effectively. And they also pour money into all sorts of media outlets and political commentators who will provide with whatever information is necessary for us to feel unsafe in Artsakh. Look at Artsakhtsis, they continue to live in Artsakh, they return to Artsakh, they take their families back in Artsakh. I'm going to Artsakh, everybody is planning their free time, whoever can, in Artsakh, and we still have Artsakh as our home. and we will do whatever we can to preserve it as such.
Yeah, very, very good. Thank you, Robert. I think that was actually a good segue for our next question. What can you tell us about the status of those Armenian residents that are perhaps still displaced from Artsakh? Could you touch on the number that it might be? We're hearing, excuse me, we're hearing different numbers. And then we're hearing now that we saw a report about 120,000 are currently residing back in Artsakh. What could you tell us about that? How many are still displaced? And then how, what the timeline might be to try to get them back to Artsakh? We understand not all of them may be able to come back, but what could you tell us about that?
Yeah. Well, it's a tough process, and for various reasons. And of course, the number one concern is security concern. And many people, especially those who had seen those waves of inhuman attacks, they feel very vulnerable about going back to Artsakh. But with the situation going like we see now, with this relative stability kind of settling those fears, we need to make sure that we're ready infrastructurally for them to return. And that process is pretty much constant. Every day, if at least we see people who are moving back to Artsakh, whoever has a chance to return, whether they have somebody, any relative in any of the villages or in Stepanakert, because now we are kind of in a shortage of available housing. At the same time, there are many houses in the rural area, in rural Artsakh, which can be improved and are being improved and will be able soon to welcome the people who lost their homes in Shushi, in Karabakh, in Hadrut, in all those regions which were affected by the war. But we are doing whatever we can to arrange the life for them, to create the conditions and to strengthen security so they feel secure, so they have what to do, and they have this smooth transition into the new place of settlement. But it is about 120,000 in Artsakh currently, and about 26,000, as far as I know, still in Armenia, and many of them actually want to come back.
Well, so then that brings the next question, which is based on the number of people and the just the scope of the work to get people to, first of all, not just to feel safe, but to genuinely be safe as much as possible. What can you tell us about either government-related, programs or any efforts that the government is taking to help coordinate people, or maybe any NGOs that are helping to help get these people back, and then what can we as the diaspora do to help? Because I think that's one of the luxuries that we have, being outside of the immediate lines of contact, and in the middle of it is we have the ability to help, and I think many of us would like to. So I guess to be succinct, what programs are available to help these people, and how can we help support those?
Well, the biggest program is, of course, implemented by the state with the help of the Armenian government. And there is financial and other sorts of assistance to everyone affected by the war. And also there is a support to everyone who is currently living in Artsakh. So the shortest way, the most efficient way, I would say, help Artsakh government to continue that, because we need funds and we need strength and financial strength. The rest is already kind of has been organized institutionally. There are various structures, including one in Yerevan, which are dealing with the issues of resettlers, and they are in a constant connection and in constant contact with those people, and those people kind of, with the principle of one window, they know where to go to ask for whatever they need. On the NGO level, yes, many NGOs are working in Artsakh, including our diaspora organizations, of course. There are a couple of international organizations who continue to work and ease the humanitarian burden in Artsakh. The biggest is the ICRC, International Committee of the Red Cross. Also, the Hello Trust kind of continues their demining activities, and some other organizations on a smaller scale, they also try to implement humanitarian projects. I know that Armenian organizations, the All Armenia Fund is very active there. The AGBU is there, the Home Haykuntian Mutual is there, Tekian in Nadram, and the Tufenkian in Nadram, and many others.
Right.
So if we talk about the ways of staying, of keeping involved or being involved, throughout these years, we kind of figured already the most effective and efficient mechanisms of doing so. And we as Armenians, as Armenian diaspora, we have so many conduits, which very often complement each other, or sometimes they are just involved into one particular sphere of the development of Artsakh. And there's a whole palette of those organizations. If anyone, you personally, or anyone from our viewers now, or any of your friends, if they need to get any further information on how to get involved, it depends on the ways they want to get involved. We know that there are also many preferences, but we can guide them through a proper channel. But that involvement can be of various types. Here, we're talking mostly to the US audience now. Here in the United States, there in Armenia, and there in Artsakh. In the United States, it is sticking around the organizations and initiatives which are trying to mobilize resources, sticking around the Armenian structures which are doing political job and raising politically the voice and deliver our message from Artsakh here to your elected representatives and executive branch, etc. There in Armenia and in Artsakh is to try to apply whatever resource you have, intellectual. Unfortunately, we also have to rely on financial too. Whatever resource is available to launch programs in Artsakh, to share your experience, to expand your operations in Artsakh. We have seen actually recently, and I want to also remind about the conversation we had a week ago, David, with Mr. Agopyan, the advisor of the Artsakh president, who really interestingly mentioned several projects of several examples of cooperation from Armenian NGOs and Armenian specialized groups who expanded their operations to Artsakh and tried to involve the most vulnerable groups of population. And also there is a focus on our youth. So when we talk about the future for me is different. The future for somebody who is just starting their life, that's very important for us. And we need to make sure that they continue to connect their future with Artsakh. Without leaving Artsakh, they can be part of the world. So if there is any opportunity for doing so, it will be only for the benefit of everyone involved. In parallel with that, of course, I realize that for many it may sound immature that Artsakh can be a place for investment, but we need to restore our capacity, investment capacity. Yes, the war is very fresh. Yes, there are many pressing issues, but we, as a state, we continue to have investment projects, which are very important. And again, Richard, to expand somewhat further this subject, I know that many among our compatriots also think that they have done their part and they have developed this or that part of, or helped to develop this or that part of Artsakh, which was occupied by Azerbaijanis. And many people think that their effort didn't serve the goal. We absolutely disagree with that. Every foot of the road which was paved in Karabakh, in Hadrut or elsewhere, they did save life eventually. They did help us to resist the plans of aggressors to conquer all of Artsakh in 4 days and extend and exhaust them for 44 days. Every new building which was built in Artsakh did save lives of kids and civilians who were who found shelter there. And if you compare the number of civilian casualties during this recent war and you compare it with the wars that we have seen in the past, of course, this time Artsakh was much safer, much more ready for that aggression. So every donation, every investment opportunity, every project by diaspora organization, they did serve the goal. And there is still place for us to continue that fight. And if anyone is reluctant to direct their resources, just like you said, yes, in the United States or elsewhere, people don't feel that daily threat but there is something that everyone can do to help those who feel that daily threat. And whatever is now we're talking about, it is pretty much material, of material value. But we have Artsaksis who continue to live in Artsakh, who continue to take their kids in Artsakh schools, who continue to live with Artsakh and by Artsakh, and who continue to be part of that thing. So if those people, even after this, even when Azeris are in the historical Armenian cities and principalities, if the Azerbaijanis occupy those, I mean, including Shushin, Hadrut, and the rest of Artsakh, which is currently occupied. If Artsaksis continue to live there, there is a place and there is a need for the rest of the Armenian nation or the Armenian family to help Artsaksis to feel they're safer and well off.
Right. Well, I think, and the reason, obviously, the reason we ask this is because, you know, we want to see as many people return to their homes as possible. We want to see as much of regular life return. And I think I can speak for my other two co-partners here. We want to shorten the time between, hey, how can I help, and it actually helping. And we want that to be as quick and smooth a process as possible, because life moves fast in a lot of places, and it's important that people have an easy mechanism for helping. That's all. So
absolutely. No, I know that this is not news for you. We've been talking to you on several occasions. I just used this opportunity to reach out to our listeners and viewers. Yeah. But the shortest way and the way that we can feel the responsibility and we can deliver as a state all the feedback and reporting and the transparency, of course, is working with the state. In that case, we are absolutely responsible for every step. But with that, if people have other preferences, there are lots of funds and organizations, and many of them are very known, especially in the United States, who do a great job in Artsakh and who accumulated and kind of jumped again back on that important mission.
Yeah, absolutely, Robert. And thank you so much for breaking all that down. That was inspiring how you broke it down. At least that's how I feel hearing it, and very grateful. And Robert was mentioning, by the way, so everyone knows that's listening, the San Francisco Bay Area Artsakh Task Force just held a virtual town hall on Monday. It was actually just this past Monday, Robert, with Mr. David Agopian, who's the current principal advisor to the state minister of the Republic of Artsakh. And that's someone that we got to know very well during the war. He was Mr. Beglarian, remind me his first name. I can't believe I'm forgetting.
Artsakh.
Yeah, Artsakh. Thank you, Artsakh Beglarian, who was the ombudsman of Artsakh during the war. He is now the state minister of the Republic of Artsakh, and David Akopian is his advisor. So we had a very insightful town hall with him. Robert was a guest and a participant on that town hall. So that's what actually led to our conversation tonight. So thank you for mentioning that, Robert.
David, if I may, also the example of Mr. Akopian is just to echo Richard's point. Mm-hmm. He is a person of decades of international humanitarian experience, and he chose to go back to Artsakh. He chose to join that fight. It is a fight. It's a day-to-day fight, and he's using his expertise, his energy, and everything he has to help strengthen Armenia and Artsakh from within. And this is also something, of course, we invite everyone who feels that capacity and who feels that possibility to join us.
Yes, well said. It's so impressive that he's done that, and we're grateful that he has done that. He served for many years with the UN, I believe, right, and other institutions. Robert, just to change the topic a little bit and touch on something that's been weighing on us for quite some time now since the war, the POW situation. It almost feels like that's been drowned out by Armenian politics, by the election, by the Azeri aggression. We were seeing a giving minefields. You don't need to comment on that. I'm just saying we were seeing an exchange of Armenia giving something to get 15 POWs back, while at the same time, 13 POWs are being tried and convicted in Azerbaijan. the trial and conviction of POWs seems to be the ongoing trend, with less and less of the POWs returning. What can you share with us about what we know about the POWs in the current situation, and how we can possibly impact that at all from here? Because we're trying to continually make sure that that is front and center news on our show as well. So
yeah, I'm sure many people will agree with me that this is the most pressing humanitarian issue as of now. We know that every Armenian soldier and civilian in an Azerbaijani prison is living in unbearable conditions, and of course we hope that everyone will be back to their families as soon as possible. Well, this issue is purely humanitarian, David, and this is astonishing how political it can be made by Azerbaijan at this stage. I mean, it is one of the items, even if Azerbaijan tries to stay away from its commitment to international conventions, the Geneva Conventions, and all the major conventions on human rights, even if they try to stay away from that, this is one of the things which is demanded or prescribed by the November 9 statement. So this selective approach in that is also something which doesn't help our expectations, positive expectations from Azerbaijan. But this issue, you said that, yes, they're trading with our POWs. It is like something medieval. They're trading 15 soldiers for something in return. They're not even hiding that they're going to trade with those human souls and human bodies for gaining something in return. So what we see now is another example of an absolute intolerance towards anyone, anything Armenian, and the absolute lack of readiness to engage in a true peaceful talks, which would leave our nations and the entire region to a better stability or regional situation. Yes, we see that trade, and that's astonishing. And we're glad that with involvement of the US government and Russian government and many other players, we sort of throughout this time, there were several cases when some of our compatriots came back. But of course, we don't even know the total number of POWs currently held in Azerbaijan for months. And this has been a real tragedy on a daily basis for us. What can we do? I think even today, it was by the Human Rights Watch, there was a condemnation of this policy. So we see that it echoes in many governments, it echoes in the US, on the US Hill, in the US Capitol, and elsewhere in the democratic countries. But we have to make sure that those statements turn into actions. And this is not a subject that tolerates any delay. This is pretty much the life and death and psychological health of at least 200 of our competitors. With all these trials and all these things, this is all absolutely subjective, and we know that they're just playing with whatever regulation, domestic regulation they want. Our position is that this should not be dealt as a political issue. This is a pure humanitarian issue. Just like Armenian side, let go all the POWs from Azerbaijan. All our compatriots should be let go and return to their families. And this notion that they can trade for gaining a military or whatever is a document is just disgusting. I'm sorry.
Right. I think we'd all agree with that, and I really appreciate you bringing up that policy has to be behind these statements, or has to follow them, because this is more of a statement more than anything else. It just seems to me that condemning someone or saying, "Oh, we condemn these actions," and then not changing your policy in regards to how you work with that entity. It's a hollow statement, because if you're not going to put if there's no teeth in it, then it doesn't matter. Right.
Yeah. And Rich, to add to what Richard is saying, actually, we have a viewer question that adds to that statement. That is actually from someone my father, who's watching us currently. The question is, what is the status of the current push to get Azeris be held accountable for the gross violations of international laws and on the humanitarian principles during the war, and as it pertains to the things that you mentioned, like the use of white phosphorus, the cluster munitions. These are things that a lot of Western nations speak out against. And how can we better push back on that? Because these are evident, violations of international law. This is, you cannot argue against this. It's clear as black and white.
Yeah. Well, there is a whole palette of violations of any sorts of humanitarian or international political law by Azerbaijan, which dates back to the early days of the Karabakh movement, starting with the Sumgait massacres, another aggression, etc., etc., etc. We have seen so many cases when Azerbaijan openly went and acted in violation of all international norms and standards. Unfortunately, this is to a great extent due to what Richard mentioned as this, what is currently kind of perceived as a constructive ambiguity. They think that if they don't call a spade, it will lead to a better situation, but it never does. It only works when you try to prevent something. But if the problem is there, you need to be vocal, you need to call a spade. You need to call out the aggressor, and you need to send that signal that this is not a tolerable behavior and you should not be doing that. If you don't, they will continue and even go further, which they eventually did. What we have to do, in some cases it worked, Greg. In some cases, Azerbaijan was punished by International Court of Human Rights, by some governments which called out or even considered during a very short period of time any sanctions against Azerbaijan. But there was no any single international big movement to prevent Azerbaijan or to punish its leaders for violating the international law. And the latest instance, what we saw last September, and something that they have forever marred their reputation with, which is linking with international terrorism for achieving any political or military goal. This is with Azerbaijani leaders forever, that they are in a common group with international terrorists. What else the world needs to speak up, to impose sanctions, to punish, and I mean the world, which has on so many occasions was very loudly announcing that they are against the international terrorism. There were even interventions military to punish international terrorists. This is exactly one of those instances when international terrorism was applied to kill civilians and to drive people from their homes. And the reaction was absolutely inadequate. Absolutely.
Totally inadequate, or almost non-existent.
Yes, statements are good, and we appreciate all the efforts. We understand what can be done, what cannot be done. But the international community as a whole was expected to act in a much more predictable, in a much more logical way. Unfortunately, we haven't seen that. But there is still way, there is still time and opportunity to correct all that. And we strongly believe that recognition of Artsakh is something that the world community should do as one of the steps towards ensuring our security in the long run, because we need to have also the political tool set. We need to be on the political map. We need to be among all those players sitting next to them who are decision makers. And for that, we need to have our independence recognized. We don't have to protect our freedom on the battlefield for so many times. We should be, as a world, as a community of nations, we should be much better than that.
Yeah, and we should be beyond this by now. I mean, I think my my follow-up question to that would be this, and this is really sort of to be filed under how do we manage our expectations? You know, how do we as a diaspora manage our expectations of the situation? Because on some level, we'd like to think that the international community can act. on some level, we'd like to believe that, pushing for Artsakh's recognition, engaging as the diaspora, engaging on a local, state, federal level to get our people to push for recognition and for some punitive actions against Azerbaijan to actually happen. We would like for that to happen. But I guess the question I want to ask is this a situation where, because Azerbaijan has got a very powerful friend in Turkey, and Azerbaijan has oil, and there's FIFA games being played in Baku, there's Formula One racing happening in Azerbaijan. Is this really a situation where Azerbaijan can effectively act with impunity and the world kind of holds its nose and says, yeah, but we get all these cool things that we get to do with them, so let's just sort of like not rock the boat? I mean, because I'd like to think that we can push, but what's really going to happen? And I don't know if that's something you can answer, but I'd like to think, you know what I mean?
No matter what is going to happen, we have to push.
Right.
We have to push, and we have to continue our fight. And still nobody rejects that Azerbaijan has consistently poor and deteriorating human rights record. And they belong to a club of these nations which are kind of boiling in their own soup, and they're ganged up against and isolated themselves from all this international pressure to create better conditions for their own population. But in many things, so in general, if we talk about Artsakh, the choice has been always between two main roads. One is to wait until these political processes or the political or geopolitical situation is favorable for Artsakh to have any more advances or achievements in the foreign policy or in our foreign policy goals, or to act now to push what you say, what you call to push, Richard, and to try to influence that process. We shouldn't underestimate our strengths, and we should create the conditions with our own governments, with our own institutions. And this is true not only for the United States, but for the rest of the world, especially in those countries in which we have very well-organized Armenian diaspora. We have to make sure that these governments, they feel they refrain from any sort of cooperation with Azerbaijan other than promotion of their own democracy or the domestic democracy or whatever is perceived to be this global action plan for the major democracies. I mean, if you call a nation consistently, if Aliyev has been named for several times the most corrupt person of the year by European human rights watchdogs, and after that you're having that FIFA or whatever event is happening there, of course it raises question. Of course they are also further marked by all those informations all that information which hit the surface about the laundromat and all that corruption mechanisms and how talented Azerbaijan is in buying political favoritism in Europe and here in the States in many cases. Yes, it is all happening. It is all part of the struggle, and we have to play in accordance with that. We have to try to unveil all those cases. We have to try to make sure that people pick with whom they're doing friendship with. Right. I mean, if we are trying to be democratic and very predictable, and when I say, well, I mean, everyone, we Armenians everywhere, including Armenia and Artsakh, we are playing on the shared, this vision, we're trying to develop on a shared vision of human rights and liberties and democratic development. The other side, the aggressor, is doing absolutely the opposite. And all we get is that constructive ambiguity, which is calling on both sides to do whatever, I don't know what.
Yeah, Robert, we're approaching on the hour mark. I appreciate your input and everything the discussion we've had. Quickly want to shift a little bit. We've had a lot of disturbing news coming from Armenia. And one thing that I want to kind of always outline, and we do on Arach Media, we never delineate between Artsakh and Armenia. Armenia and Artsakh are interlinked. It's one and the same part of the same nation, always was, always will be. However, obviously, some of the territorial losses currently relate to what we're having. Like currently, for those that don't know, the issues in Gerarkunik are actually stemming from the regions formerly Karabakh, right? That would not be possible a year ago. So my question to you is, what can you say about the recent strikes on the Armenian border, let's say, right? And how does that kind of interplay and relate to Artsakh and the ongoing aggression and provocation posturing from Azerbaijan?
Yeah, well, again, I have to remind the words by my boss, the foreign minister of Artsakh, who said that in the face of Artsakh and Turkey, we have the most sincere enemy.
Mm-hmm.
They have never hidden their true intentions and long-term intentions towards not only Artsakh, but also the Republic of Armenia. When they say that Yerevan is Azerbaijani, that Zangezur is the land of Azerbaijan and they're going to return there. And many people underestimated those statements. They saw that these Artsakhis, they've created this image of a never settling appetite in Azerbaijan, but it is really insatiable if it comes to Armenians in the South Caucasus. Even in the diaspora, you remember all that Aliyev named every Armenian of the world their enemy number one. Right? So and we have seen those attempts. We have seen those things to attack even the Armenian organizations and structures throughout the world. Whatever is happening now in Armenia, yes, there are different opinions on that, but I cannot detach it from the situation in Artsakh, of course. This is not just an attempt to demarcate the border. This is an attempt to improve their positions, including military positions along the border between Armenia and Azerbaijan, the border which was never seen this scale of military presence since the collapse of the Soviet Union. This is something new, and they're trying to improve their positions, and they're trying to take whatever they can, feeling that Armenians who suffered this military defeat will be accepting anything which is put on the table. And they're doing it, they're blackmailing it. This is the very vivid, for me, example of military and political blackmail towards Armenia. They also try to derive or distract attention from the situation in Artsakh, because in parallel with that, they say, well, the Artsakh problem is that there is no such a thing as Nagorno Karabakh. It doesn't exist. In parallel with that, they change the economic demarcation in Azerbaijan and establish Eastern Zangezur, implying that there is also Western Zangezur. These are steps of a continued aggression against Armenians in the South Caucasus. These are the steps of the same game. There is no peace in that effort. There is no any peace in intentions. There is no just an attempt to demarcate the border with Armenia. It is an attempt to demarcate it in a way that Armenia will never be stable, that Armenia demographically will continue to suffer, that economically we will continue to suffer, that militarily we will not be able to restore our positions, and that also they have this notion that every demand should be delivered now. Also, as I said earlier, there are many things which are many obligations that had been assumed by Azerbaijan but were not delivered on.
Yeah. Robert, thank you so much for breaking that down. I know I myself have a lot more insight from the overall situation and how it relates to what's happening in Armenia now. Thank you to you breaking that down. I would imagine Greg and Rich could speak with you guys too in that, and I hope our viewers as well. I hope that we're able to open up the eyes of our viewers and of our friends and our family in the diaspora around the world to have more of a clear picture on that's what's happening right now. Because, we're at the top of the show right now, we were saying how it feels like it's business as usual everywhere while there's fighting going on in Armenia, and Artsakh is still, the status of Artsakh is still uncertain or still not even resolved. So thank you Robert, for joining us and for staying up so late to talk through all of this with us. Of course, you are a friend of the show, and you're our friend, and we hope to continue a dialogue with you again soon.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Have a good night, and best wishes with everything in DC. And thank you for all the work that you do, just communicating and working with our elected officials in Washington, DC. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Take care, Robert.
Thank you.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. You know, this is our second real Arach, experience with the man, and I just, I just feel fortunate and privileged to be able to do something like this. I think it's really amazing. Super gracious for this time, in Washington, D.C., 3 hours ahead. So, West Coast time, we're past 10 p.m. here, which puts, which means his Friday is going to be, he's going to have an interesting Friday. And I'm just so grateful that he was willing to take time with us.
And absolutely, he's a friend. He's more than just a representative of Artsakh. He's an Artsakh. See, David and I think we mentioned it, Rich, we've talked about it. We on Arach Media are going to keep elevating the Artsakh voices because they are the most at the forefront of at what's going on right now. And it's mission critical for that to continue. I heard things that I never knew. I appreciate the insight. I want to keep, I want to keep drumming the beat of understanding that the diaspora needs to come to terms that we don't live in little Armenian feudal clans. I am Javakhti, right? So I'm an Armenian from Georgia, right? Then there's obviously Yerevansis, Gyumritsis, you guys are in the diaspora. There's Artsakh, and then there's other adjoining regions, right? We are one nation, and Artsakh is not just a region that, at times causes issues for Armenia or it's our burden. No, it's actually our battle cry, and it's the first time that we've ever pushed back on the recessions of our lands. And it's literally what we're going to go into, what, David, you've prepared for today about the horrendous issues that are happening in Armenia, the skirmishes, right? They're happening in areas that a year ago would not happen. Why? Because the adjoining areas, as we call them, and I never called them, that was always Artsakh, the buffer zones, as you want to call them, they literally shielded Armenia from anything that you see happening today. So that is the interconnectivity that every diaspora needs to understand. And that is how important regaining those lands is and will be to the future and the stability of Armenia forever and evermore. That's the way it has to be stated.
Yeah, well said, Greg. You know what, guys? I know this isn't planned, but why don't we go ahead real quick to show the map? Are you guys okay with that? I know I just put us on the spot, but the map, your favorite map, Greg, the Caucasus Live map. I think I'm gonna, just because it'll illustrate what you just mentioned, Greg. And Rich, I just put it in our chat.
Thank you. Let's see here. There it is. So I'm gonna show the map. So to understand what it's what David just mentioned.
Yeah, because the border, like you said, yeah. Go ahead.
As you're doing that, before we pivot completely, I just wanted to address one thing about all the folks that have been interacting on the feed up until now. I really apologize for not being able to flag down some of those questions. I really would have liked to have asked Robert some of them, or at least made mention of them, because it really means a lot to us that you are interacting with us live while this is happening. We also needed to be respectful of his time because it is 1 o'clock in the morning in Washington, D.C., and we just wanted to make sure that we could keep going. So thank you for your comments.
I will, and again, in expediency and trying to, explain what's going on with the map, right? I will be as fast as I can. So this is currently,
it very clearly shows the territory that we used to have, and then now the territory that's gone, and how that the border, virtually the entire eastern border of Armenia is now with Azerbaijan.
So
not virtually, it is.
Everything in blue used to be Artsakh, the free and liberated Artsakh. By the way, there was this thing that I asked of Robert, what about the region of Shaumian? It's right here. It literally never was in Artsakh. It was not liberated because there are very, very high mountains right here. Okay, so there's like a wall, and Shaumyan fell behind that wall. But to go back to what is happening today, Ahadrut, a region that he mentioned, let's not forget, has never been non-Armenian for 3,000 years. Think about that. Up until November of last year. Okay, first time ever Armenians have not been in this region. Moving along. This pink area is what we have left of Artsakh. Also important for him to explain that all of our arable lands are gone. So we now need to essentially terraform this area to allow for its self-sustainability. However, zooming into what's going on in Armenia and all of the major skirmishes, yes, there was an issue here in Yerash, and there are some issues happening here in Syunik, but even Syunik and Geharkunik, everything stems from the lands that were given back, and I use the word given, I'm sorry. Okay, Karvachar is the region where Dadivank is, and from that region, you access Sotk, which is the mine, Vardenis, and all of the troubled lands right now. And every single skirmish that we just saw is because they're strengthening their positions, they're advancing, they're pushing, they're harassing, and they want to essentially make Armenia and Artsakh unlivable. Not my words, Robert's words.
Exactly, yeah. And I think the big thing that stood out, right, guys, was that, and this is a perspective that we're not necessarily all thinking about. They are clearly just trying to, the whole attack on Armenia also has the aspect of trying to distract of these on the status of Artsakh, right? Yeah. So that, I thought that really stood out too. So we're super grateful. And Greg, thank you for talking through this. It's an important map that illustrates.
One more thing. Yeah. This region not only was a buffer and a safety zone for Armenia. This region, I would say, even more so than this region, although all of them are important, right? But this region is also a source of a lot of the water into Armenia. And for all of those winemakers out there making wine in Vayodzor, this is something for all of us to think about as well, okay? Yeah. Because Armenia will and is already having water issues, and it's going to be a continued problem. Not to mention the fact that Azerbaijan keeps stating that, Lake Sevan is theirs, Yerevan is theirs. They are making the administrative district of Eastern Zargezur. Well, guess what Western Zargezur is for them? Syunik. Okay? So, and I appreciate Robert saying, and all people that are sober saying, Turkey and Azerbaijan have been the most honest enemies that we could ever ask for. Yep, exactly. They say to you what we're going to do, and every Armenian in the world keeps guessing. Can it be done? Yes, it will be done if we don't stop it.
Yeah, they've been extremely transparent.
Right.
Well, guys, lots to cover. Shall we get into it? Try to rattle through some of these things. What do you think? Yeah, thank everybody for watching. Thank everybody for their comments, as you mentioned, Greg. Your comments and questions on the feed.
Yeah, indeed. Well, we have a lot to cover today. Obviously, there's the Azeri tax in Armenia. We've got some statements about what's happening from the United States and from France. We've got some discussion from the Minsk group about the Azeri aggression, and we want to talk about the POWs. There's also some news coming out of Armenia that we should probably touch on. And then there's some more coming out of the United States. So let's just start with the big stuff, which is the attacks on Armenia itself. For months, we've been talking about Artsakh, and many people cloaked it in this, well, it was disputed territory anyway, even though we all knew that there was really no dispute other than international incompetence to recognize it. But now the attacks have come to Armenia, and many of us knew it because they were encroaching on the territory, and they've been provoking and pushing things here. And this is the same playbook. So I don't know. Let's get right into it.
At least since May 12, right? It's been even more direct aggression. Right. So, guys, the last 48 hours, even less than 48 hours, there's actually been fighting between Azerbaijan and Armenia in Armenian territories. Okay. Around 3:40 a.m. local time yesterday, July 28, 3 Armenian soldiers were killed. 3 others were wounded in heavy fighting with Azeri forces. This happened in the Geo-Politics province, which was bordering the Kalabajar, like you were just mentioning, Greg, and actually just meant it directly follows what Robert was saying. The statement from the Armenian Ministry of Defense is that the enemy is trying to improve its positions and create favorable conditions for making advances. So the Armenian army was able to push them back around by 9:20. They were repelled. There was a ceasefire, a Russian ceasefire, that was brokered by 10 a.m. local time. And we'll get to in a moment, we'll get to how that was already broken. You guys, please add anything else there that I may have missed.
Yeah,
Greg.
and obviously the what do you call it, the push came from the Azeri side onto Geo-Politics. There were also statements about the Syunik, the gold mine with 150 employees being evacuated because of the escalation of the fighting. These are not just some simple, just like in Yerazk prior to that, which is on the Ararat Valley side. These are not just some little cross-border skirmishes. These escalated into heavy rounds of mortar firing, right? And at some point, David, I think you and I kind of were, gesturing to one another. Well, is this another war happening again? Because that's what it felt like. The response from the international community was tepid at best. And that is actually something that we should no longer be surprised at, but more kind of seeing as the baseline, okay? And we must push our agenda in terms of explaining to the world that if this escalates, another war will start, and where this will end at this point, I think Armenians need to not care anymore. Will it escalate into a larger regional thing? I don't care. I think we need to only care about the safety of our survival. And God rest the souls of the three boys that died.
Yes, they were Senior Lieutenant Haik Gevorkian, Private Koryun Harutunyan, and Private David Kocharian. Thank you, Greg. Sorry to interrupt you.
And we must always remember these names, because these people are literally allowing us to continue being Armenian. Okay?
Yes. The ceasefire has not lasted very long. Again, this sounds very similar to the 44-day war, right, guys? Rich, absolutely. Greg, over and over, we're talking about it. Rich, you were saying it, right? They are not able to abide by any kind of ceasefire agreement or any kind of agreement whatsoever. Robert just mentioned that as well, because at 3 a.m. local time today, Thursday, Azeri forces once again broke a Russian brokered ceasefire, and another Armenian soldier was injured. This was from Armenian positions once again in Geo-Politics. So, and yes,
well, this is a tactic that they've been using, which is, say that there's a ceasefire so that the Armenians begin to relax a little bit, and then they push on. So this is I think designed to have us to have us collapse. There's no other way to put it other than this is a strategy, because there is so it's interesting how on one hand they are, like we've said, they're the most honest adversaries we could hope for, I guess, but then they're the most dishonest when it comes to the way that they're actually engaging. Like, they're not coming to the table with a genuine will to have a ceasefire. All of that is temporary. I mean, we've seen it in every interaction they've ever had. Am I wrong?
No,
exactly. And again, this all follows what Robert was saying as well, right? He detailed this so well, nearly perfectly. He detailed all of this, because now we have statements that have come out, right? Robert even said it. Statements are great, but we need action. We need policy. We need some kind of international response, but we're not seeing it because Armenia does not carry the same kind of geopolitical need, geopolitical significance that other nations do, right? So it was the State Department spokesman, Ned Price, that made this statement. The United States condemns the recent escalation of violence along the international border between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And he said, continued tensions along the border underscore the fact that only a comprehensive resolution that addresses all outstanding issues can normalize relations between the two countries. Again, like Robert just mentioned, a very general kind of, what's the word he used? Just a very general, neutral statement.
It's this normalization. It's the, it's like in a family feud, if a brother and a sister are not getting along, and the brother is the aggressor, and the parents turn around and say, well, hey kids, you need to calm down. And no, it's not you kids. One of you started something, and you got to be punished for it. And in this case, we have a whole country or two countries who have employed other people to come in, and are causing problems that need to be stopped. Period.
Exactly. Exactly. And now France also made a statement calling on Armenia and Azerbaijan to resume political talks. Sounds very similar to what the US is doing. But their quote, at this very moment, when we are holding an event, armed operations are taking place in the territory of Armenia and the Geo-Politics province. That was France's ambassador to Armenia, Jonathan Leconte, who he said that during a press conference, which was dedicated to the completion of archaeological excavations in Erebuni. So again,
I want to show you those articles really quickly, because we're going this fast. So there's, are we there?
Yeah. Jonathan Leconte made the statement.
So we've got one statement here, and
that's the U.S. That's Ned Price, state U.S. Right. And then there's France.
Right.
And let's actually look at the juxtaposition, right? France is actually seemingly concerned, while the United States is doing the both of you knock it off situation. You know what I mean? Like, right. You cannot tell me, and both of you need to also know that the U.S., with its laser precision understanding of what's happening on the ground through every single CIA clandestine blah 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 blah, that they don't know exactly who was the aggressor in this particular isolated incident. So there's really no need for the Armenia and Azerbaijan need to stop fighting.
Right.
It needs to be a pointed statement to one aggressor, and then understanding that Armenia is fighting back as a way to protect itself.
Right. And then, of course, guys, the Minsk group co-chairs, OSCE Minsk group, which is supposed to be what the representatives of the nations, France, Russia, and the US, who are supposed to be brokering a peace in the region. But we have not seen anything close to that, right? They came out with a statement, which again is very similar. They say the co-chairs view with concern recent incidents along the border, including reports of casualties and loss of life. They call upon both sides to de-escalate. Of course, again, Greg, like you said, both sides. They're saying we're going to post the actual statement, but they also mentioned that the co-chairs reiterate the need for a negotiated, comprehensive, and sustainable settlement of all the remaining courses.
I have to tell you, this just sounds like a staffer wrote it. Nobody's serious. Nobody's serious. Like, and maybe they don't have a financial incentive to be serious. Maybe they don't have a political incentive to be serious. But,
right.
We have a reason for them to be serious.
It's true. It's seeming more and more like the Minsk group is really not, it just has no place at all right now, right? Guys, so why don't we can keep moving on, right? Just to we touched on. Go ahead, Greg. Go ahead. Yeah.
Obviously, we've touched upon it with Robert, but the ongoing issue with the POWs, another group of 13 Armenian POWs, which, by the way, let's underline again, it is illegal to sentence and try prisoners of war. There was an open conflict, a conflict brought about by Azerbaijan onto Armenia.
Right.
Yeah.
This happened today. 13 more prisoners of war were sentenced to 6 years in prison. They were found guilty of illegally crossing the border, weapons possession, and terrorism offenses. All just completely absurd accusations and fabricated lies by Azerbaijan, official Azerbaijan. Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, it just begs the question. So are they now saying that there was no war, that they were, because it seems to me like what they're trying to do is say there was no war. We were kicking people off of our land, and
exactly.
They were enemy terrorists.
Exactly.
And
exactly.
Yeah. So exactly. Let's move along.
Yeah, I mean, so speaking about going back to Armenia,
Yeah.
Pashinyan's proposing the need for more Russian troops on the Armenian Azeri border. He's seeking more peacekeepers. Yeah.
Yeah, and always, we here at Arach Media try to be objective, right? But I'm sorry, guys, if I see something, I say something. The reason why this can't be just stated out of the blue, like Armenia is seeking Russia's protection now on every part of its border, rather rendering itself as a state that can't protect itself, which is absurd. But the way that it was done, there's a follow-up to this statement. Russian Foreign Ministry and the CSTO group also kind of said that it is irresponsible for Pashinyan to make that statement, believe it or not, alluding to the fact that then I had to deduct, understanding that this was only made known to Russia via this press conference. And the response from Russian ministry was, you do not make these statements without initially speaking to the party that you're speaking to. Okay?
Yeah.
So if you want to call me critical of the administration or them being completely lacking the understanding of what is the procedure of international relations, it's clear as day. Like, what is,
I mean,
Right.
not number one, and number two, not a single press conference during the time of fighting. Okay, this is the elephant in the room, and I will always address it. Let's
Right.
keep going.
I would agree with you. What I would say is that this smacks of the issues we were talking about with him before, with him being like Trump, which is ready, fire, aim. Like, he says things without clearing them. He does things without thinking them through. It's a mess. It seems like a mess. But,
And
Right,
I
yeah.
would not say this. Sorry, I would not say this. Had I not heard the statement from the Russian Ministry of Defense? And I was like, well, why are they saying that? Oh my goodness, he never asked them for this. He asked them in the only thing worse than doing it in a press conference is if he was to do it on Facebook Live. Do you guys understand what I'm trying to say?
Right. And Pashinyan's quote was that by having the deployment of Russian border guard outposts along the entire border, his quote, it would enable us to carry out border delimitation and demarcation without a risk of armed clashes. The Kremlin spokesman was quick to comment on it, Greg, to alluding to what you're saying. And his comment was just that Moscow's making continuous efforts to strengthen the ceasefire, and he had nothing more to add about their contacts with Yerevan. So
again, on the Pashinyan tilt, I think we should just move to the next unbelievable story that about communications being open. Can you guys help me unpack this? Because this seems like a complete alternate universe.
Well, I think we need to talk to someone from the administration, man, because it's thoroughly confusing to me, Greg, unless you have more insight on this. Because again, he has two things that sound completely contradictory in his statements. He's saying, Pashinyan, Azerbaijan continues to point out the topic of some corridor, right, which was on the November 9 agreement, mentioning specific routes and directions. Pashinyan goes on. I have said many times that Armenia has not discussed, does not discuss, and will not discuss any issue of corridor logic. It was on the November 9 agreement, right? Then he goes on to say that all transport and economic communications in the region should be opened. All. He's saying just as Armenia must have communication with Russia, Central Asia, and Iran through the territory of Azerbaijan, so should Azerbaijan have communication with Nakhchivan, Georgia, and Iran through the territory of Armenia. In order to implement this program, customs checkpoints must be set up at the relevant border points. I'm thoroughly confused. Yes, that's his quote.
I mean, he's actually, reading this understanding now, he's a little bit walking back, and actually for the first time, I'm in slight agreement what he's saying. So what he's saying is no flyover corridor over Armenia. Essentially, that would not be the what do you call it? The unblocking of the economic trade routes, right? Essentially, all you're doing is you're bridging Azerbaijan to Nakhichevan over Armenia. And in
Right.
reality, he's saying all the former Soviet Union rail links. So by the way, back in the Soviet days, how would you get freight goods into Yerevan from Moscow? It would come through Baku. That's the way it came back in the day. I guess Pashinyan is alluding to that those trade routes, Yerash being actually an area where the rail would exit Ararat Valley and into Nakhichevan, and then go through and then back, enter into Armenia. And again, this is where the diaspora needs to learn the map to understand what I'm talking about, because the geography there is quite kind of convoluted. However, the whole idea that I always kind of fight back at is that Azerbaijan is, I believe, only posturing at the need to unblock the economic trade routes, because currently, what is the Azerbaijan's blockade? I would like to ask. There's only the blockade of Armenia. There's no communication. Armenia has no what do you call communication on two sides of its major borders, right? In terms of Nakhichevan, Nakhichevan currently is linked to Azerbaijan through Iran, and Iran has no problem letting them do that. Okay, it has been doing so for 30 years. So this need to fly over Armenia is just a way to kind of shove it in our face yet again. So for the one point, I am a little bit happy that Mr. Pashinyan is waking up to the need of, no, we cannot have a what do you call it, a flyover corridor over Syunik, and in reality, we should have what do you call it, customs border what do you call it, border customs, as those entities enter and exit Armenia and into Azerbaijan.
Okay.
Not to mention, I just don't know how that's going to look economically, just in general, when they're mistreating our POWs, attacking us, and here we are having echelons of Armenian goods go through Baku. I just don't know. I just don't know.
Yeah, there can't be peaceful communications the way things are. Yeah.
All right, we've got one more piece of news coming out of Armenia, and that is about COVID. I know we've got a lot of things going on in the Bay Area, and Sacramento just had its Sacramento County just said, "Oh, you got to wear your masks again." And I'm just gonna quick shout out to everybody who decided not to get vaccinated and didn't stay home and didn't wear masks. Shame on you. I'm looking at you.
Gotcha.
It's all your fault.
Yeah, more than I saw something about over 200 new cases of COVID in Armenia in the last day or so, but only 163,000 vaccine shots have been administered since the launch of the government's immunization campaign in April. That's according to the health minister, Arach Avetisyan. So they have purchased, or they will purchase, 500,000 more doses of vaccine. I'm not sure if it's really clear what vaccine. They were administering AstraZeneca, so I'm not sure, and Sputnik, and CoronaVac. I'm not sure what that is. So they were administering those 3 to date. So it's not clear which ones.
The article, David, to answer your question, the article says that they will purchase 300,000 doses of Pfizer and 200,000 doses of other, whatever those are. I think.
Got it.
There is also, actually, if we're on this topic, there was a concerning news item that I believe Aram Hamparian shared. So I will trust the source because he's not the one to lie. That apparently the Biden administration was withholding the donation of Moderna, obviously being Nubar Afeyan's company, an Armenian philanthropist and entrepreneur, the developer of Moderna vaccine, the founder of the company Moderna. There was a little tidbit about how the State Department is withholding the donation of 500,000 doses of Moderna to Armenia. We'll investigate further, but that seems a little crazy.
That seems weird. Like an Armenian wanting to help Armenia? Yes. It makes no sense why they would block that.
But why would no? But why? Because I think the United States, because it's tax funded, is keeping vaccines as a kind of as a measure of the United States has to okay for you to ship anything like that to any country out there. So I'm curious why the U.S. State Department is doing that, but we'll look into that. And
sticking with the U.S. government, perhaps we should touch on, we weren't able to talk about it with Robert, but the Plone Amendment passed. So something positive in the House of Resolutions. right, guys. Thankfully to Congressman Frank Pallone, Democrat out of New Jersey, for all of his work on our behalf. They were able to get some military bloc approval within the House. Of course, this still has to go through the Senate, and then eventually the State Department, then the president has to make the final say on appropriations and funding. But what this amendment does is that it actually states that none of the funds appropriated or otherwise made available by House Resolution 4373 under international military education and training and foreign military financing program may be made available for Azerbaijan. Now, it's important to note, and this is how politics works, guys, right? The provision does not block discretionary military equipment, which may be transferred by the Department of Defense under US laws, Section 333. So there is still a loophole, if you will, that the State Department or the DoD can still send military equipment there.
Yeah, but
it's still a win. Yeah. We have to take the wins we can get. Go ahead, Rich. Sorry.
yeah, I mean, but let's put that in practicality. I mean, do we really think that, do we really think that gunships are going to be loaded up with gear and sent over there? I mean, I don't know. It seems like a weird loophole, but I don't pretend to write policy. So
right. And of course, Armenian caucus leaders, I'm so grateful for my own Congresswoman, Barbara Lee. She's been such a strong supporter of this. She's spoken out very strongly against the waiver of Section 907. That was brought up as well during these hearings on the House floor, and how there was so much concern about how that was waived. Section 907 of the Freedom of Support Act. Yeah.
Jerry, how did Jerry do? I need to look at Jerry McNerney.
I don't think he hasn't been involved with this, man. We got to do some more outreach to him. So let's work on that.
Jerry, we're coming for you, bro.
We got to do it. We got to do it.
You can't be my congressman and be so flaccid on the Armenian issues.
Exactly. He's got a bunch of Armenian families in his district, man. You got the Doyens, others. So yeah.
Sounds like somebody needs to get on the phone, Greg.
Yeah, we got to do it, man. The only other item really that's related, and actually the main reason I put it on here, guys, was because it was actually showing her maybe doing something, and I mean that. I'm gonna be very pointed. But U.S. Ambassador to Yerevan, Lynn Tracy, she visited one of the volatile sections on the border. She visited in Syunik, and yeah, we need more from her. We've come a very, very long way from Henry Morgenthau and John Evans in terms of U.S. ambassadors actually doing something.
Possibly one of the most un-Armenian ambassadors we have thus far.
She reiterated U.S. concerns. She reiterated U.S. concerns over incidents along the border. That's what she did. That's what the ministry said in a statement. So
U.S. concerns on the border.
Yeah, that's what the Armenian Defense Ministry said, that she inspected a border section near Varenshorja, a village in Syunik province, after meeting with Major General Arach Media, the commander of an Armenian Army Corps stationed in the area. So,
all righty.
Yeah.
Well,
excellent.
Yeah, thank you guys.
So, yeah, I think probably the next thing is I'm going to put up a couple links that I want to share with everybody. Let's talk briefly about something that is coming up soon, and that is first of all, I wanted to say thanks to Robert, who why is this not doing what I wanted it to do? Okay. Thanks to Robert, the Permanent Representative to Artsakh to the U.S. for joining us tonight. It was a huge deal to have him here. Next August, we're going to be on break in August. David and I and Greg, we will find a way to keep in touch with you and let you know, what our plans are. But our next show is, of course, going to be Thursday, September the 2nd, 9 p.m. Pacific time on Facebook Live. Where you're joining us right now. We've got a few links to show you. One is for our link tree. You can stick your phone right up here and get up to our link tree. You can also follow us on Instagram and on YouTube. So you'll be able to see these broadcasts in perpetuity, I guess. So we're hoping that you will all continue to pay attention to us and follow us wherever you can, because we're working hard for you. So with that,
Yeah.
thanks to everybody.
Well said, Rich, and amazing visuals. I hope, I know our viewers will really appreciate that. Amazing visuals, guys. Yeah, our first hiatus in a little while, right, Greg?
Yeah. So there, let's explain this. It's a hiatus, but it's also a regroup. There's a lot of cool things in the pipeline, and we will be communicating them with you. That being said, David, Richard, and we've been nonstop since November, and David and I have been nonstop since the beginning of the war, and it is taking a toll on us. But this is not the purpose of it. The purpose is to regroup, to come back stronger, and to do something bigger. That being said, there's like things that are happening in our personal lives we can kind of highlight. Richard has a venture that he wants to finally start. We're not gonna release what it is. There's a venture that he's starting. Yeah. It's quite quiet. Zip it. David's going into a little bit of a edumacation that he's trying to do. I don't know if you want to drop what it is.
I'm starting an executive MBA program at Santa Clara University. I'm excited about it.
I always like our youth educating themselves. And David, thanks for doing that.
Hey man, thanks for calling me youth. Thanks for calling me youth, man.
I myself, we always forget, but I am first and foremost a winemaker. I know I've been everything else and in between. And in August, a little key factoid: global warming. The grapes are coming in a little bit faster than I've expected, a little faster than every winemaker has expected. They're just to give you an idea, usually harvest swings into full gear end of August and starts ramping out hard September, with like Napa Cabernet coming in even in the late October, sometimes early November. All of that has shifted by a month and a half earlier. That's how crazy things are in terms of ripening, and those of you that are in farming and ag will understand that. So I am starting the crush and fermentation this year earlier, and it's going to be it's a heavy time for me.
Yeah.
Being said, we're going to continue posting things throughout. We just won't be live in the month of August.
Right. So, and just to sort of level set on that note for a second, Greg, for those of you who don't know about Greg's passion for winemaking, this is a tradition that for Armenians dates back 6,000 years. So he's carrying on, and his family is carrying on a tradition that dates back to the origins of wine itself. So you're welcome, world.
Cotting wine.
Cotting wine is a company. Yeah, lots of cool things are going to happen. Friends, I don't want everybody to think, oh my God, Arach Media is stopping. No, we have a lot of momentum. And I guess let's throw it out there. Should things go horrible, and I hope they don't, you will obviously see us break our silence and start going live again. I pray to God nothing happens. We will continue posting, and this is only for the month of August. Starting September, we're coming in live hard with amazing guests lined up and a couple of cool projects that you will hear about, and a kind of a regrouped vision of Arach Media. That's it.
Indeed. All right, everyone. Thanks again for joining us. Just remember all the links that we put on the feed. You should be able to go in and read if you want to. There's also the link tree that David put together, which it's sort of the master links for everything. So if you want to get involved and you want to get onto the ANCA, the Armenian National Committee of America, or you want to interact with the Armenian Assembly, both of the political wings of the Armenian nation, please go and do it. There's links to the AGBU if you want to be involved, but don't necessarily want it to be political. There's links for every way that you can possibly want to interact, and it's all on the link tree. That's our master one. So there you have it, and we will see you. Hopefully, we won't have to see you before September, but not that we don't want to see you, but Greg just explained it. So there you have it. So there you have it. All right.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Have a great night. Thank you, guys. Yeah.
All right, take care.